Welcome into another episode of Peacock and Aponte, or as the kids are calling it, the Picante Show. We're going to talk about Diamador Lenoir's details of his contract, and Brian and I are going to break down each positional group who holds the advantage for Sunday's game against the hated Seattle Seahawks. Stick around after this. Welcome everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte. I'm Jason Aponte. That's Brian Peacock. This is Peacock and Aponte, a.k.a. The Picante Show. Brian, I haven't seen you in a while, man. How's it going?
Oh, it's going good. I've been traveling around the state and having a good time watching football, doing podcasts from all the locales that I happen to be at. Back home now, excited for Niners-Seahawks Part 2. See if we can keep this train rolling and just keep sweeping the Seahawks right off of the schedule every year. I don't mind that at all.
I like marking down wins and knowing that they're wins. It's a feeling that Seattle knew for a long time against us, and I think that's kind of where we are here. But before we get into all that, Diamador Lenoir gets signed. It feels like one of those preemptive moves. Again, not being under contract going into free agency, it's something that you couldn't risk because it was just going to push things up. But I wanted to get into the full details. This is per Jonathan Jones. He's an insider for NFL on CBS. The details on Diamador Lenoir's contract: 5 years, worth $88.8 million, 15.5 guaranteed at signing, and 43.3 in total injury guarantees. I'm not really big into the cap numbers, Brian, and there's a lot of really good people that do a lot of good work when it comes to understanding the salary cap and proving to us that it's real. But doesn't that feel like a bargain for a player who is going to be a top 10 cornerback this season and for the foreseeable future?
I'm trying to do my quick math here and divide 88 by 5 because it was 92 before, or so we thought. And that was 18.2, I believe. So 88, so 17.6 kind of puts him in that same zone. He's kind of the annual salary for Diamador Lenoir puts him in a zone that's between where the top guys are right now, the top dozen or so corners in the league, almost all of them exclusively outside cornerbacks, with the exception of Jalen Ramsey, who's the most expensive corner in the league, and he gets moved around a lot into a lot of places. And then there's a big gap. It goes from like 14 mil a year to almost 20 mil a year. And Diamador Lenoir is the first guy that's kind of in that between zone. And I think it's interesting because you get ahead of the next free agent signing period, right, in 2025. And we all know how it's going to go up again. And it always goes up crazy. And what you think a guy's going to be worth, you can add 10%, 20% sometimes. I mean, it's going up pretty crazy. And then as the top cornerback contracts continue to rise, his will continue to fall. And I've said this before, and I think on the offense and defensive side of the ball right now, and maybe linebackers you could start to point to, because I think like how many times do we go break down games and it's like, man, these linebackers are awful and they're susceptible in coverage, right? There's not that many Fred Warners out there. And so I think the value of linebackers has kind of gone up, but I've always said in the last year or two, especially in so running back value has dropped throughout the league over the last 10 years. Quarterbacks are getting paid twice as what they got paid just 5 years ago, right? I think the best money in the NFL right now is tight ends, guys like George Kittle. People are talking about, might have to cut George Kittle's salary. Dude, George Kittle's worth double what he makes right now. And tight ends make nothing for what they give you in the run game, in the pass game. And I think nickel defenders on defense are one of the most cost-effective ways to spend money in the NFL. And I think we're going to start seeing nickel guys start making a little bit more money, because it used to be, you're the number 3 corner. You're the little guy that isn't good enough and fast enough and have enough length to play outside. That's not the case anymore. You see Brian Branch, who's in the conversation, I think, for Defensive Player of the Year for the Detroit Lions. Diamador Lenoir, a guy that can play legit outside cornerback and then is one of the better nickels in the NFL as well. That is super valuable. That's more valuable to me than a guy who only can play outside. And because you have run responsibilities, but the middle of the field is where everyone's making their money, especially all those Shanahan tree offenses, which is like a third of the NFL right now. So I love it for your Diamador Lenoir. I think it's the right amount of money. And I think it's a great payday for him. It puts him below the top tier of corners in the NFL. And I think he belongs in the conversation of some of the top tier corners in the NFL. He's been that good for the 49ers. He's been the best player in the secondary by far for the Niners this year.
Yeah, and that was the point that I wanted to touch on because we watch a lot of football, but I'm trying to figure out if there's a cornerback with the skill set of Lenoir being on base downs outside, kicking inside on nickel, and you don't lose anything. Jalen Ramsey, when he goes in the slot, it's because he's shadowing someone. It's not a function of the defense and who's out there. I don't know if there's any other cornerback in the league that is able to duplicate that skill set and to have somebody as versatile as that, because God forbid there's an injury outside, he can just play outside and you're fine with that. Or if you have an influx of cornerbacks, obviously this affects Renardo Green, who seems to be his running mate for the foreseeable future as well too. I just don't know if there's a cornerback that can duplicate that sort of productivity skill set and have no drop off when you move outside or inside.
Yeah, like Ramsey's the only guy of the top players that I can think of right now. Most teams don't move their corners around that much. There's no more Revis Islands or anything. There's no Deion Sanders in the league anymore, and you almost can't really be that anymore in the NFL because it's so difficult to play cornerback in this league right now, and the rules continue to help the offensive side of the ball more than the defensive side of the ball. And so what he's able to do is pretty unique, and he's been a model player for the 49ers, the way he plays. And I think it really goes to show where if you go look at all the hits and misses of the 49ers, they've done such an amazing job. Another 5th round pick that they've hit on, not only starters, but star players. Like if you get a 5th round player that just sticks on your football team in a backup role or a special teams role, that's a good pick already. The 49ers have gotten starters and star players in the 5th round in their drafts over the last, half dozen years. Since they showed up in 2017 with a new regime. It's been really phenomenal how well they've done on day 3 of the draft. And Diamondor Lenoir is another one. And when you look at every single one of those players, why did they hit? Because of the mentality, the hyena that Diamondor Lenoir is, the way they play. George Kittle, the way he's wired. Talanoa Hufanga, the way he's wired. Dre Greenlaw is an absolute maniac. And maybe they're missing one of the elements of height, weight, speed, timing, whatever it is, as part of their Juwan Jennings, another one.
I was going to say
dogs, right? Like they're all dogs. And so even Brock Purdy, it's like he's guts and smarts. It's not because he's 6'5" and has a cannon arm why he's a good NFL quarterback. So all of those hits, they've all hit on the same thing. And it's the character, the football character and the personal character of these guys, the work they put in, how they're wired. And so it's just something to, remember when we're going through these prospects and you look at all the 49ers hits so far, it looks really good in this draft class. And it's like, oh, well, is he this fast or is he this or this? How is he wired? That's the number one thing teams have to figure out. You look at all the greats, the average quarterback in the Hall of Fame is like 6'1", that's how they're wired. And the 49ers have been really good at finding some of those players. And then you look at some of those misses as maybe they're trying to chase attributes and didn't hit on the way the guy's wired.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because the 49ers clearly have something that they're looking for in terms of all the other things that they can use physically. And the terms thrown around, he's a Niners guy, right? And that's the process, I think, while we're the guys who we can solely go off of draft prospects and their film and their fit, right? And a team's need, we don't know what's going on up here. And that's the part we don't get to interview these guys. So when we look at a 49ers draft and we say, oh my God, they passed on this guy, they passed on this guy. Well, maybe they were never really big on him. Kingsley Suamataia comes to mind, right? Like there was something about him that they just didn't care about, and they didn't, not that they didn't care about, they didn't value as much, and they were fine with letting that go. But when we react to draft classes and we say you passed on this person for this person, there's a mindset and there's a character, like I guess trait or traits that that goes into the evaluation process that we're not privy to, and we're just solely going off of the team's needs, that player, but it seems to be working because of all of the things that you said. So I think we have to start looking at this differently when it comes to just the name, just the talent, because we can say, how could you not draft the right tackle here? Well, you end up with Bernardo Green and Dominic Pooney, and now look, and now look at this entire draft class. I think there's a little bit more to the process, clearly, because they've spoken about it, but we're just privy to just the talent. We don't get a chance to actually see what's going on up here and listen to them and see if they're one of those 49ers guys.
Look, again, the 49ers aren't unique. Every single team, you listen to the GMs and the coaches talk about their draft class, and they all say the same thing, and they're all looking for the same thing. But yeah, that's the incomplete that we have as outside evaluators. We don't get the medical reports. I don't get to see these guys MRI. I don't know that there's like some chronic knee injury for Jay Ajayi. I'm like, how is he still on the board? Well, he's only going to play 3 years because he's got bone on bone in his knee. And it's like, oh, okay, that was good. That would have been nice to know before the draft, right? And he was a good player for a very short time because he had no knees. And it happens all the time. And you don't get like, I've been a hiring manager at places before, and I've worked with people. You ever been next to a cubicle with a guy that you can't stand, And it's like, I've sat across from somebody in an interview, and I was like, I do not want that person in the building with me after 5 minutes. And so I can imagine seasons of having somebody who's like a locker room cancer, and everyone's trying to avoid that. DK Metcalf, who the Niners are going to see, looks like he's going to play for the Seahawks this weekend. A great one. There are reports that he bombed his interview. The Niners hated him in his combine interview, and he's yucking it up, got his shirt off with Pete Carroll, and they loved him in their interview, right? So that's the thing, is every team's trying to find it. So it's not unique to the Niners, but I think they're doing a better job of actually just finding those guys, because everyone's trying to find high character players and players that are wired correctly. It's not a novel idea, but I think it's easy to say and hard to do. And what's crazy is with most teams, in the 49ers, you look at their early picks where they're not nearly as good in the earlier rounds as they are in the mid and late rounds. And you wonder, well, you have all this extra information. How come teams aren't better than the top internet analysts and the consensus draft boards, and teams as a whole aren't better than the consensus draft boards? Why is that? Because they have a ton more information. How come they're not getting it right? So even with all that extra information, they don't always get it right. But the Niners have hit, especially on those later round picks. And I think part of it is they stop looking for the height, weight, speed, and just start finding ball players.
Yeah. And that's what's funny. And the first Senior Bowl that I ever went to, it stuck out listening to a scout talk about what goes into it. And he said, people evaluate the player, but the hardest thing to do is evaluate the person. Because you can have it all and not put it together. You could have less and work harder than the next guy. And you want to build that foundation and culture. Do they fit in here? Are you just looking for guys who could blow up your whole season, but they're physical freaks? Another guy that comes to mind, and it was when I was at the Combine, talking about bombing interviews, Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau has all these attributes, and he's just at the podium, just not giving off good vibes. And from everything and every person that I spoke to, they said he's bombing his interviews and he just doesn't care. Like that's the thing. And that's the hard part of all this. The 49ers are looking for high-end players. They're getting them. And like you said, they're all kind of missing something. Well, Fred Warner's too little. I don't know if he's going to be a good linebacker. Well, George Kittle's a little too slow. I don't know if he's going to be able to, well, Brock Purdy's not, but you're finding people who are going to work, who fit your culture, who fit what you can do, and you can put them in positions to win. The amount of high-end guys, like you don't just have high-end players, you have the top of the league players. And other teams are trying to duplicate your process, and they're absolutely trying to copy what you've been doing. But the hardest part about it all is bringing someone into the building that embodies your culture, that will buy in, and that is going to work harder than everybody else. That's what makes the draft a crapshoot. You could have a guy who's physically gifted, absolute freak, jump high, run fast, everything, and he could bust in the league. Why? He probably took his talents for granted. He probably has just a poor attitude all the way around. He probably doesn't work well with others. That's the part of the process that is the hardest to nail. And the 49ers continue to nail it. And now this draft class looks like the best one under the Lynch and Shanahan era. And that's insane because in 2019, they drafted Dre Greenlaw, Nick Bosa, and Deebo Samuel, and a starting punter, since we want to get crazy. So it's crazy to think that even with all the losses to the front office, we think Adam Peters, we think Rand Carthan, we think all these guys that have been around, and yet the 49ers still keep getting it right. And I don't think you can, and I think a lot of the talk was attributed to one person. It was, oh, that's an Adam Peters pick. Well, we never knew any of that. Well, Adam Peters isn't here now, and the 49ers are still being successful at the draft. There's a method to their madness, clearly.
what's hilarious about all of it is Adam Peters looks like he's nailing it where he's at too. He found himself. He was like right away. He's like, oh, cool. I'm gonna go. It was pretty hard finding a franchise quarterback, right? Oh no, my first shot. There we go, franchise quarterback. I'm gonna go get a defensive lineman that should have been drafted in the first round. I'm gonna get him in the second round. We're gonna make some moves, and they're already winning games. So Niners are all right without Adam Peters, and Peters is doing all right himself without the 49ers. So whatever that secret sauce is, they got something figured out. And obviously we like to crush some of the Shanahan picks and some of the Niners picks, and draft season is always a lot of fun because everyone's got their opinions, and we evaluate the tape because we don't know the people at all. And they clearly are doing something right, and Peters was part of that, and he took part of it with him, but he didn't take it all with him because they already have it in place with the 49ers. So really cool to see the Niners have an awesome draft class. And look, it's early. A lot of things can happen, but I mean, it looks phenomenal so far. And you think Adam Peters likes his draft class too. So pretty cool to see both thrive apart. It wasn't just one or the other.
100%. And we can pivot here from the discussion. And I think one more thing about Demo, and I just wanted to make sure we get it up there. I think that sends a clear message to the guys in this draft class as well, too, like a Dominic Puni who doesn't have a fifth-year option. We're going to have to get this done with you early, and we will reward you. And the same thing with Bernardo Green. You're not going to be, you don't have a fifth-year option. We're not going to be able to play around in the offseason with you. Like, other teams are going to come calling. But if you continue to do things the right way, you continue to perform at the level, we're going to take care of you in season, and we're going to get this done. So there's no worries, and you can take care of your family. It's a great message to send to all those young guys who have already given early returns. And we're still just scratching the surface with Ricky Pearsall. He actually has a fifth-year option at least. So that's something they can hold in their back pocket. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But those other guys that don't, they're sending the message that if you perform, you go by the 49ers way, you're a great fit. We're not going to let you go, and we're not going to let this drag out, and we're not going to get into a bidding war with other people. You will be rewarded.
Did the 49ers also clue us into their long-term plan of not only signing Diamondor Lenoir, but probably not signing Charvarius Ward and Talanoa Hufanga, who are both free agents? And part of that is because of their draft class, and knowing that they're already comfortable with Malik Mustafa being the starting strong safety and Bernardo Green being the starting outside cornerback. So they replaced those guys much like they did, although we didn't get to see it right away, with Aaron Banks replacing Laken Tomlinson, and he didn't play at all his rookie year. I was like, oh, is this the right? And I didn't love that pick, by the way. I was like, is he a right fit? And I didn't, the Niners were kind of transitioning to a little bit more gap stuff and bigger bodies up front. And, I was like, oh, he's not the traditional outside zone guy. I don't know about his movement. It looks like his feet are tied together, and he kind of changed his body. And all of a sudden, second year, he's ready and he's starting. It's like, okay. And so that's another thing to remember come draft time. Whatever next year's free agent class is, look out for those positions in the draft too. Because I think a lot of people are looking at tackle. It's like, well, they had McKivitz and they felt okay about it, and they actually extended him, right? And they had a bunch of free agent corners, and so they drafted a corner high, right? They had a free agent wide receiver. They drafted a wide receiver high, and free agent safety drafted a safety high. So there you go.
Yeah, and this draft class was imperative for them to continue to have young, cheap impact players, and you've gotten all full ends of the spectrum right now. Puni looks like a Pro Bowler, All Pro. Ronaldo Green's a solid starter. So is Malik Mustafa right now. They can change to that. You've got contributors with Pearsall. That's a contributor, right? The level of what you define as a hit goes into, I guess, where you were drafted and I guess your prospects. But when you get a 7-round draft and you've got contributor, solid starter, high-end starter, almost all pro, all through that, that's a successful draft class. And that's how you sustain winning.
Oh, just being on the roster 4 years later is a hit in the NFL draft, right? So already you feel great about what the 49ers did. And that's not even talking about Garendo and Cowing and some of the other players that the Niners picked up in the 2024 class. So looks great. Are they all superstars? I don't know. We'll find out how those careers go. Early returns are awesome. And the 49ers haven't been great at playing rookies early either. And usually they get forced in. And then when they get forced in and start playing well, it's like, cool. And so we hope it doesn't. We hope the Ayuk thing. Remember the Ayuk thing? He played a lot as a rookie, and then we found out in year 2 he went to the doghouse, and Kyle's like, "I only played him because I had to." You hope it doesn't happen with. Actually, we hate Malik Mustafa. We only played him because we had to. You hope none of those things happen. And Ricky Pearsall, especially those wide receivers going to the doghouse, cowing. But it's pretty phenomenal what the 49ers have done. Clear multiple hits, which is so important. And yeah, great job. Also, hey, by the way, mentioned offensive tackle. Like the 49ers have to find a tackle. And Trent Williams is close to the end. Is that 2 years? This is last year? Is it 5 more years? I have no idea. But Pooney, the future tackle, maybe?
Possibly. And that's what
he's played so well at guard. Do you want to have an awesome guard or just like an okay tackle? Does he profile? Because, a little shorter armed. All the reports were like, he's a college tackle, probably inside guy. Niners thought right away, inside, center, guard. Burford got hurt and was like, well, right guard, and you're going to be there. Do they like him at left guard? Do they like him at right tackle, left tackle, potentially replacing Trent Williams even? So that's an interesting one too, because that was the thing with the Suamataia is like, it's hard to find offensive tackles. It's hard to find because like Pooney, great prospect, right? I loved the tape. I was ecstatic when they drafted Pooney. I was like, this is an awesome pick. But it's like all these guys are like, probably a guard. It's like it's hard to find someone with the physical attributes to be a starting NFL tackle that you can project that coming out of college. And the Niners got pretty lucky having 2 decades worth of Joe Staley to Trent Williams. And you got to draft those guys in the first round for the most part. You got to draft them early. You got to spend a lot of money on free agency, and they don't hit free agency, the good ones. You got to overspend for a Mike McGlinchey at right tackle, right? And you can ask 49ers fans if they thought they should have signed McGlinchey. I think the answer would be no. And so, like, if Pooney can play tackle, there's some extra money because that was the whole thing with Suamataia. Is like, well, at some point you got to draft and develop a tackle because you should probably have competition for McKivitz. Maybe you want to replace him. And it was nice to be able to trade for a Hall of Fame tackle. Is there another Hall of Fame tackle out there when Trent retires? The Niners going to be able to trade for? Unlikely. That doesn't happen a lot, So you got to find tackles. Maybe Pooney's that guy.
Yeah. And it kind of ties into this, and this is why I kind of put it up here, because this was, we're going a little bit long on the draft class thing. It's just, we're excited about it. And I think it's just fascinating going through the process of how the 49ers have been able to do it. But Vieta says, aside from Purdy, is there someone else you would pay next year? Banks, Huff, Greenlaw, worth it. Greenlaw, I would say, I think Huff leaves. And I think, and this is my just, don't know anything, complete shot in the dark. I think they replace Banks with Spencer Burford and keep that position relatively cheap because he's looked a little bit more comfortable in that spot, and they let someone else overpay Aaron Banks, and they can get similar production from Burford, if not maybe a little bit more, since that's his natural side, from Burford. So that's kind of just where I am. I think they're completely fine with Malik and Jair Brown. I think Greenlaw is a staple of this team, and again, they did him early as well too with the extension. I think they'll reward him as well for everything. And then I think Burford is the person that goes to left guard to replace Banks as an in-house kind of continuity move, with the idea that we can get the same production for far less, for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, I think the writing's on the wall. I think Greenlaw's still under contract next year, right? Mm-hmm. So he's not a free agent. But as far as the free agents, Ward, Hufanga, Banks, I would say it's better than 50% chance that all of them end up walking. And that was what a big piece of this draft class is replacing those pieces. And now they're going to have to keep drafting. And look, if there's any position I trust John Lynch right now on, it's safety. Because every time we're like, Jimmy Ward, okay. Oh, Tart, yeah. Oh, yeah, no, okay, yeah, Tart's good. Oh, Hufanga out of nowhere. Tashawn Gibson off the street, cool. Starting safety, right? They've always figured it out, and it's always been good, like very good results at safety. And they did it again with Hufanga, with Malik Mustafa. It looks like Jair Brown looks rock solid back there. They'll probably add more. So I just think safety, guard, I think those are positions right now, and they've paid so many guys, you just can't pay everybody. So you paid one corner, you're probably not going to pay the other in Ward. They've gone cheap at safety, and so I would expect they don't re-sign Hufanga. And then, do they pay a guard is the big question in Banks. And I'd probably say there's probably less than 50% chance that Banks comes back on a big money deal, because guards are getting paid a lot now, and you just can't pay everybody. So they got to keep that. They got to have another good draft class next year, and they got to probably find some more bargain players and let Spencer Burford compete and find some competition there at guard. And there's Jarrett Kingston. He's still around, right? Somewhere? Is he on the practice squad?
He's on a practice squad somewhere. Yeah, I think he's in Carolina right now.
Okay. Snatch
Drake,
him back up.
Nugent as well too. Like, is that your center of the future? Like they've got things in motion. It's just, best laid plans of mice and men, right? And I think the best way to insulate yourself is just to continue to just keep drafting and keep developing. So yeah, like again, it's hard not to be excited about this draft class with the early returns, but the process has just become much more in focus now that we see this Lenoir deal going down and the limitless possibilities that they could have, because they do have all their picks next year as well too. Another full 7-round draft, another first-round pick. I think that's what makes this exciting and could be, saying that the 49ers aren't going anywhere. All this talk about last dance and everything, and maybe not, maybe not. The good teams stick around usually when they have a franchise quarterback, clearly. But when you draft this well, it's hard to count the 49ers out. And if they have another banger of a draft class, which could just be 3 starters out of the 7 draft picks or 2 really high-end players and a bunch of contributors, that still hits right there. And I think the level of what you define a hit has to go into the type of player that you got. But a hit, like you said, is just even being on the roster 4 years down the line and being a contributor.
One more quick note on Diamador Lenoir. Now, I know we got to get to the Seahawks here, but Demo is now the one and only player that is signed in 2019 for the San Francisco 49ers.
Wow.
All the other extensions they did end the year before. There were 4-year extensions. This is a 5-year extension. There are some players they got about $20 million on the books, but it's all void years. So there's
2029, you mean, right?
2029, yeah, the 5th year of Diamador Lenoir's extension. Mm-hmm. He's the only guy that's under contract. There's $20 million in voids. I think McKivitz has a void year. Trent Williams and Bosa and I think Ayuk and all the big money contracts are pushed out with void years. So there's some void money on the books, but no actually players under contract to play in 2029, except for Diamador Lenoir now.
Very interesting. Obviously, a part of the future. Him and Renardo Green are your starting cornerbacks for the foreseeable future going forward. So Seattle Seahawks. Brian, the way that I'm viewing this game is Seattle's going to come out playing for their lives. Their season is on the line here this week. There's nothing more scary than a wounded animal. Now, obviously, we're going to go position by position. And the way this exercise is going to work, guys, is we're going to go position. I'm going to run through the numbers. We're going to contextualize what the numbers mean, what their function is in the offense, how they or they roll, and what's been going on. And then at the end, we'll let you guys decide, and we'll give our answers on which has the advantage, right? And I think that should be a little bit of a fun way. But, the 49ers are looking for their 7th straight against Seattle. But I wonder if Seattle comes out and throws the kitchen sink at everything, right? And especially with special teams, right? I wouldn't be shocked if they try a fake punt, something crazy, right? Like if the game starts to get like a little shaky and they want to get back in it, the 49ers are good for a special teams blunder to let a team back in. I think the 49ers win this game, but I think Seattle is going to go and like balls to the wall in this game. And they're just going to try their best to, I mean, they're always going to try their best, but they have to win this game.
Yeah. And can the 49ers put together a good game in all facets for 4 quarters? And it's a rarity this year for the 49ers. And the Seahawks are a very different team. The Seahawks probably had that same vibe the Niners did a few weeks ago when they played. And that was like, man, the Niners cannot lose to the Seahawks here and start falling further behind and back against the wall. And I think the Seahawks are definitely that team. And it's a different Seahawks team because the Seahawks they had Stone Forsythe, a complete disaster at right tackle, looking like they're going to get Abraham Lucas back.
Abraham Lucas is starting. Yeah.
He's starting. Okay, there you go. So that's official now. And he's going to be back. DK Metcalf has been hurt. He's trending that he's going to play. They didn't have like almost their entire defensive line in that game. So Niners just crushed them up front. The Seahawks really had no chance because their offensive line was garbage, right tackle and right guard. And they had no defensive lineman and no pass rush. Hall was out. Mafe was out. Their first round rookie Murphy was out. And I think most, if not all of them, are back now on the defensive line as well. I know Murphy came back a few weeks ago. Mafe, let's see if there's an update.
I think he's back as well too.
Mafe was limited this week with a knee, and then Hall came back multiple weeks ago as well. So, they're a completely different football team because they have actual NFL players now added to both lines. So that's going to be different.
Yeah, 100%. And again, the first game was in Seattle, obviously here in Santa Clara. expect the mindset to be completely different because their playoff probability, if they lose, goes into single digits. And not that that means anything because or it does. I'm just saying, like, it's not a predictor, right? Like, it's just kind of based like analytically, and it's just you don't want to go down into that position because now you're in the basement of the NFC West, and Arizona looks like they're not going anywhere, especially with the way that their schedule is looking going forward. So Seattle's really got to just try to scrap and claw in this game, and that makes me a little bit nervous. But let's start with offense, and let's start with quarterback. Okay. Look, I know what the obvious answer is, but I wanted to go through some of the numbers and just kind of throw this at you because I thought it was super interesting. So Brock Purdy's 181 out of 278, 65.1%, 2,454 yards, 8.8 yards per attempt, 12 touchdowns, 7 interception, the highest graded passer in the NFL. Geno Smith is 233 out of 342, 68.1%, 2,560 yards, 7.5 per attempt, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, the 11th graded passer in the NFL. Here's the funny part. Obviously, the attempts are off, right? Because, Seattle's a pass-heavy team, and they've been down in games. And I think a lot of their running game is the extension of the running game with quick passes to Kenneth Walker, who's having a phenomenal year. And we'll get to running back. But here's what I find funny. Pro Football Focus has big-time throw percentages. Brock Purdy's at 4.7. Geno Smith's at 4.7. Pro Football Focus has turnover-worthy plays. Brock Purdy and Geno Smith are tied with 10 turnover-worthy plays. Now, Purdy's at the top of the league with ADOT at 9.7, and Smith sits at 8.0. Again, a function of the running game. I think we know this answer, but I just thought it was funny to have those numbers come across and just be identical. And I think even with the higher attempts, they still have those identical numbers.
It's pretty insane how close they are. And I'm looking at the PFF numbers right now. What's fascinating is I thought they were going to be back to back because Purdy's got an 82.3 grade at PFF and Geno Smith's 80.2. So only 2 points between them. Yet there's still two quarterbacks in between because Purdy's 8th. And I'm not sure who 9th and 10th are, but Geno Smith's 11th. And so there's a lot of quarterbacks, and those are high grades, by the way. If you have an 80 grade at PFF, that's a really good grade. This isn't like Madden where you're like a backup if you're 79. That's an awesome grade, right? So 82.3 and 80.2. And in fact, Purdy was the highest graded passer a few weeks ago, according to Pro Football Focus, until that, I think it was the fateful Chiefs game where changed a little bit for him. But yeah, they've both been really good. I know a lot of people clown on Geno Smith, like, oh man, he's so terrible, and he's that bust quarterback. And to be honest with you, I think he's super underrated, and I think Purdy's kind of overrated by a lot of people and underrated by a lot of people. And I think a lot of people don't want to be realistic about how hard it is to play quarterback in the NFL. And for both these guys, I think Kyle Shanahan puts a lot on Brock Purdy, and I love the latest QB school from JT O'Sullivan. And it's like answers are in the offense. They are, Kyle, but you could make the answers easier sometimes for your quarterback, right? And Brock is so good, and that's why they complement each other so well. And that's why Brock Purdy is so good in Kyle Shanahan's offense, and that's why Brock Purdy is the quarterback right now and not Trey Lance, right? Because he puts so much on him, and Trey Lance was just not ready and couldn't do it. You remember back at the beginning of Trey Lance, like, why is he running the ball 16 times? He's calling plays like he doesn't trust his quarterback. Because he didn't trust his quarterback at all. Like, obviously now it's like, oh, okay, it looks completely different with his 7th round rookie out of nowhere. And Geno Smith's level of difficulty is crazy hard right now because their line has been awful, so they can't run at all, and so they're behind the sticks. And he's throwing more than every quarterback in the league behind a bad line. So I mean, it's been a high level of difficulty. He's got some nice receivers there, but yeah, both these quarterbacks I think are really good and I think disrespected in a lot of ways. And it's amazing how similar their stats are.
I don't think Geno's trash. This many, I've never. I mean, maybe I said that on a drunk day. I don't think he's trash at all. I think
everybody listening to this podcast would prefer Brock Purdy over Geno Smith. I'm not going to fight him on that one. Yes. But Geno, I think, unnecessarily gets crushed sometimes. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. I'm glad it's not like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes in Seattle, though, too.
Right, 100%. And yeah, so look, the thing that tips the scale for me a little bit is just the turnovers. You have the amount of interceptions that are higher for Geno Smith, less touchdowns, and you talked about it. That's why we have to contextualize and talk about these positional breakdowns, because not everything is apples to apples, and numbers don't always tell the story. And that's what I was saying about average depth of target. Like when I watched the Seattle Seahawks so many of their running plays are just like quick dump offs to Kenneth Walker and allowing him to break a bunch of tackles. And again, you talk about the line and not having time, and you're missing DK Metcalf, and you have and I'm really impressed with the receiver core, and we'll get there because we're going to go to running back right after this. I'm definitely taking Purdy just based on the way that he's been performing this season. But it's important to highlight all of these things that have affected Geno Smith this season. And part of the reason why you see a throw and you're like, what was that? Well, he didn't have time to get rid of it, or his receiver ran upfield, DK Metcalf, on the Renardo Green one when he was supposed to, flatten that thing. I think it's all turnovers are not created equal, and numbers don't simply tell it. I think Geno Smith's a fine quarterback, and I think he's the shining example of why people take chances on first-round quarterbacks over and over and over, because there is a way to get something out of them, even if it isn't what you projected out of the draft class.
And how landing spot can help or hinder a quarterback too. And we've seen it with, Sam Darnold, and we've seen it with Baker Mayfield, and we've seen it with Geno Smith. And even those, 49ers next offseason should go find one of those cast off former highly touted quarterbacks that flamed out in a bad organization and sign them, get the next Geno Smith, the next Baker Mayfield for the cheap as a backup, like they did with Sam Darnold last year. It was a smart move.
So I was going to say, once Minnesota kicks him to the curb with JJ McCarthy, maybe we get Sam back in here.
It's hilarious how the Vikings fans' tunes kind of change. It's like, man, Sam Darnold, he's playing like MVP of the NFL right now. And then all of a sudden, 3 picks later, and they're like, JJ McCarthy era. Cool. We're ready for that. Thanks, Sam, for holding down the fort. They turned on him pretty quick.
It's a win-win situation for them. They're going to be a playoff team. They're having a fun season, and then you get to turn it right over to your guy after he sat for a year. Unfortunately, not the way you wanted him to sit for a year. But I don't know if JJ was healthy that he was going to give that job away early on when they were 6-0 either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, So quarterback advantage, I say Purdy. I think Brian agrees. I think everybody watching agrees. So we move to running back. Running back's a little bit harder to evaluate, but I think we know that Christian McCaffrey is a game changer. And I think when you're watching and you look at the numbers and you see, wow, snap share right away, and then you see Isaac Guerrero blow a block, and you're like, that's why Kyle Shanahan wants him on the field all the time. He understands everything, the gravity, all of that stuff, right?
I don't know, man. 3 yards per carry?
No, all right. So that's what I was getting at, right? So you see the gravity, right? And you see the space that opens up, and it's drawing up the safeties for them to be able to take shots over, right? Like, that's the little stuff that's there. Or when you can get him in coverage. I mean, there's nothing better than getting him in coverage against like a defensive end or Vita Vea or something like that, and just see them flail around trying to get there. So Christian McCaffrey, look, 3 yards per carry. I think Chris Forrester spoke at the press conference today and said, I thought he was on point. We need to do a better job of giving him a little bit more space. And he's not all the way back. Now, having said that, I think we both agree that Christian McCaffrey is better than Kenneth Walker. But Kenneth Walker is having a phenomenal season, and he has been very good in his time as a Seattle Seahawk. They drafted Zach Charbonnet to be this pass catcher extraordinaire, but they don't take Kenneth Walker off the field. And he actually has racked up 30 receptions. Again, function of the run game, a little bit more of a just, get it to him and go. But 99 attempts, 398 yards. That's 4 carries, 6 touchdowns, 30 receptions, 217 yards. The third highest graded rusher in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. Kenneth Walker's a stud. He really is. And he's a very good football player. But I think we all agree that Christian McCaffrey's got to give them the edge in this one, right?
Oh, yeah. Impressive with what Walker's been able to do. 4 yards per carry behind that offensive line is actually really good. But we can move on because the other guy's Christian McCaffrey that he's competing with there.
All right. This one is probably going to make people mad at me, but I have to go with what we see. Wide receiver. Okay, so let's start with the guys that are available for the 49ers. 1, 2, and 3. Juwan Jennings, who is the new X receiver. My God. When you talk about pleasant surprises, that's one of them, like, easily. I never would have been able to peg him as the X receiver based on his physical game and his style. But just when you got that dog in you, man, you can do whatever you want. But 32 receptions, 497 yards, 15.5 yards per reception, 3 touchdowns, the 7th highest graded receiver in the NFL, 84.8. I have the hot take that he's the best receiver on the 49ers in 2024. I don't know if it's so much of a hot take, but I think he is.
It's hard to argue. He's been the best.
Right. Deebo Samuel, 29 receptions, 468 yards, 16.1 per reception, 1 touchdown, 14th highest graded receiver in the NFL, 82.6. Debo's still that guy. He still has the big playability. Obviously, everybody's focused on what happened, but there has been a little bit of disrespect hurled Debo Samuel's way because he's not a route runner, but people win how they win, right? Some guys win with routes, some guys win with smarts, some guys win because they're just better and they just know where to be. And that's what Debo does. Obviously, you can't understate his importance to the offense. Ricky Pearsall, 11 receptions, 132 yards, 12 yards per reception. His first NFL touchdown on a Sunday. Welcome to the show, young man. Doesn't matter that he's the 73rd highest graded receiver because he's just starting out and he doesn't have that, right? So let's move to Seattle. DK Metcalf was out for a few. 35 receptions, 568 yards, 16.2 per reception, 3 touchdowns, 36th highest graded receiver in the NFL. This is so interesting. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 50 receptions, leads the team, 568 yards, identical to DK Metcalf, 11.4 yards per reception, 3 touchdowns, the 33 highest graded receiver in the NFL, 33, 36. See where we're going here? Tyler Lockett, 34 receptions, 456 yards, 13.4 per reception, 2 touchdowns, 40th highest graded receiver. They're all bunched together right there in those 30s. I think the Seattle group is better currently than the 49ers group.
I would take the Seattle group currently because of the varied skill sets there. And to be honest with you, I think, and nobody comped these guys, and I never really thought about it until right now, Ricky Pearsall and Jackson Smith and Jigba with their roles in the offense now and how they're good in the slot, their quickness, they're kind of very similar players. That was never the guy that people compared Ricky Pearsall to in the draft because he's not white enough, but it's actually kind of a good comp because they're not the biggest guys, but they're quick, they get open, and they're going to be used mostly as the, sort of that slot option, although the targets have been really high for Jackson Smith and Jigba, but everything's kind of been underneath and he hasn't really been unleashed until DK Metcalf was out. Now with Metcalf back, he's kind of going to be relegated most likely, unless, I don't know, maybe he'll take over some of Tyler Lockett's targets there. And Lockett's just been a really good player for a really long time. I would take the Niners group going forward, especially when you consider next year with IU coming back. But right now, as it stands, as long as DK Metcalf is healthy, he's a freakish outside guy. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett. This is a really close one, and I'm not going to fight anybody either way. But man, Juwan Jennings might be the best guy right now. If I could only pick one, that's what's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and again, like, it's not me being like, oh, like a hot take, anything like that. I just, when you look at that group, and you mentioned it with Tyler Lockett, his career is winding down, but he's just been such a solid player. And with Russell Wilson and with Geno Smith, and he continues to be a pro's pro. And for a little guy who, a lot of people say, well, he won't be able to, make it in the league. We all see the smarts of when he gets in the open field and he sees a hit coming. What does he do? Get down. I'm not gonna tempt fate at all, anything like that. Tyler Lockett's the tops at that, but Jackson Smith and Jigba has been really, really good in an expanded role, and that's why people were so high on him in the draft class.
Right, Pearsall's still a rookie, and Debo hasn't had as many breakaway catch and runs or runs out of the backfield as he has in past years either, and so he needs that as part of his game. To be that dude, and nobody's going to give up. Nobody's trying to get rid of Debo Samuel, but he just, I would like to see him break a couple, and this would be a good week for it, right? See him breakaway runs,
and he did it. He reached his top speed since 2019, if I'm not mistaken, on that 76-yard touchdown in Seattle. A lot of the talk about Debo's speed being gone, it's a little, again, it's been overstated a little bit. But yeah, I've got Seattle with a slight edge. But if Brandon Ayuk was ready to roll and it was Ayuk, Samuel, and Jennings, I think we have a completely different discussion. We're just talking about the group that is in front of you today, not what's going to be there tomorrow.
Offensive line?
Yes, that's what's next. Okay, so all right.
I'm looking at your article right now. Did you tell the folks where they can find the written version of some of this?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And please don't kill me, guys. I don't make the name for the site. It's NinersNation.com. I don't make it. I always get yelled at. Did he just say Niners Nation? Yes, it's the place that I work. I didn't make up the name. It's above my pay grade to change it. But yeah, that's where you can find it, position by position.
That's an old name, and I remember when that site first was happening, and I was actually this close to writing for the draft site for the Sports Nation pods, like way back in the day. And I was like, man, could I write about the draft every single day? I don't know if I can. So I didn't do it. And then they ended up doing the mocking the draft site, which ended up being really good. And so good for everybody. I think that I didn't start doing that. I was like, I'm not gonna write about the draft in August, man. I love it in March, but August, no, I don't think I'm gonna do that. And but I remember it was like a lot of them were like, because Athletics Nation was one of the first, and there was a lot of, Raiders Nation obviously makes sense, even though I don't think that's the name of their site on the Sports Nation.
Isn't
When I
that
saw
the
Niners Nation, I was like, that is a terrible name. You guys got to come up with something else. You can't do that, and you got to just think of something, right? And they couldn't. They're like, I don't know. We're just gonna if we can't think of anything clever, it's gonna be blank Nation because we're Sports Nation, and that's what it ended up being. I was like, that's terrible. You can't do it. It's not the Nation. There's other nations. Can't do it. Niners Nation, but they did it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, right? Like, isn't this because again, I'm not a Cali boy, right? I'm a East Coast guy who, fell in love with the 49ers and covers them now. Isn't the crux of the argument that it's Raider Nation and Niner Empire and you can't do the same thing as the Raiders? Yeah, like, all right. I mean, I personally didn't understand it because I'm not from Cali. I get it. But when I got clued into it, I'm like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, just had to preface that by saying I don't make the name and I just write for them and I just cover the team through them. But either way, because Brian's got to get out of here pretty soon. Offensive line. Trent Williams, 86.2 offensive grade, 4th in the league. 86.1 pass blocking grade, 6th in the league. At the tackle position, let me just make sure I preface it and say that. 81.4 run blocking grade, 7th. Aaron Banks, 72 offensive grade, 19th. 63.7 pass block, 37th. 72.7 run block grade, 17th amongst all guards. Jake Brendel, 62.2 offensive grade, 22nd. 41.8 pass block grade. Jake Brendel's 36th. Brian Peacock, how many centers are there in the league?
64, including backups.
Well, let's just say starters.
32.
Oh, God. All right. 69.5 run block grade, 14th. Dominic Pooney, absolute stud, 78.8 offensive grade, 9th. 70.6 pass blocking grade, 23rd. 76.5 run blocking grade, 11th. Cole McKivitz, 69.3 offensive grade, 32nd. 65.4 pass block grade, 48th. 70.3 run block grade, 27th. Charles Cross is the starting left tackle. He's a stud. And it's funny. Charles Cross, Trent Williams, there's your strength right there. 84.6 offensive grade, 6th. 80.4 pass block grade, 16th. 82.9 run block grade, 5th. Old buddy Lincoln Tomlinson, 68 offensive grade, 32nd. 66.1 pass block grade, 30th. 68.4 run block grade, 26th. Connor Williams, who was out there for a while, actually, for anybody to sign, 63.9 offensive grade, 17th. 62.3 pass block grade, 22nd. 71 run block grade, 12th. Anthony Bradford, 50.4 offensive grade. That is 72nd among guards in the NFL. 51.6 pass blocking grade, 64th. 58.6 run block grade, 56th. And Abraham Lucas is back, and this is his first game of the season. Brian, you go first. You tell me what you think.
I mean, it's the 49ers.
Yeah.
Their best player is the left tackle. He's not better than the Niners' best player, who's also the left tackle. Brendel has been a little iffy for the 49ers. Colton McKevitz has been better than I think a lot of people expected in some ways. Pooney's been awesome. Banks is fine. With how bad the Seahawks have been at guard and tackle, and it's hard for me because they've been awful at tackle, but they get Lucas back. So that helps them here. I'm still going 49ers here, and I would take the starting 5, including Lucas in his first game back. We'll see if Lucas returns to form and how quickly. But the worst player of both lines is Anthony Bradford, the right guard.
Yeah, and again, I'm with you. I think it's clear above. I think the sum of the parts is obviously better. When you look at all the metrics, I mean, their right guard is 72nd out of all the guards, and there's 32 times 2 starters, 64. Not good, Bob. So yeah, I've got the 49ers, and then we can wrap up tight end pretty quickly, huh?
Oh yeah, and I don't know if Fant's even going to play. He didn't practice earlier this week.
No, it's going to be, what's his name, Ed Barner, or Ted Barner or something like that. I don't know. They always find like those like makeshift tight ends, like him and Will Disley, like it just, But I'll run through the number.
Wasn't he the guy, the actor in the Rockford Files?
I think so, actually. I'm just making stuff up at this point. George Kittle, 43 receptions, 560 yards, 13 per reception, 7 TDs, leads all NFL tight ends with that number. Highest graded tight end in the NFL, 90.9. And if Noah Fant plays, we'll just throw his numbers up. 27 receptions, 285 yards, 10.6 per reception. 27th highest graded tight end in the NFL. This one's pretty easy. George Kittle's the best tight end in the world.
Best tight end in the league. You don't need PFF grades to inform you of that one. So this was not even close.
All right, you got to go because I know you're streaming with Croc before Thursday Night Football. But real quick, just a quick prediction. What do you think? What do you think happens on Sunday?
I like the Niners in this one. Niners are the big brother in this rivalry. I think it might be a little different Seahawks team than we saw. I think it's a better 49ers team, though, than we saw a few weeks ago as well. And so it's probably going to be a good game. Those division matchups can always be super weird. So it's not like I'm just like putting it in pen necessarily, but I do like the 49ers. I think they're favored by whatever it is, 6.5 points for a reason. I don't know if I would take the 6.5. But straight up, I'm definitely taking the 49ers, and I think it's going to be Niners-Cardinals down the stretch, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, give me the Niners, and I think this is the prediction that I have. This is the game that the 49ers get into the red zone 4 times and score 3 times. I think this is the game that they figure that stuff out. They're just a tick away. I think that's exactly what's about to happen. But let me let Brian Peacock go. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to both channels as we simulcast on here. I know you guys are going to go over and watch Locked On, but Brian, tell everybody else what else you got going on before you get out of here.
Yeah, me and Croc about to go live as we do every single day. Well, we don't go live every day, but we drop a podcast every day on the Locked On Podcast Network, breaking down the 49ers. Locked On 49ers. I'll put the link in the chat, by the way, if you want to jump over there. About to go live with him. Keys to victory for the San Francisco 49ers against the Seahawks this week, and chat it up with the folks live as we do to usually end and begin the week's post-game. So tune in there, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live in those post-games. And I'm doing Peacock and Williamson as well. My co-host, Matt Williamson, former NFL scout, former ESPN scribe. Now he's in the Pittsburgh area covering the Steelers, and we break down the entire league daily on the Locked On Podcast Network. So check those out. Follow me on Twitter at BD Peacock. And, of course, OT with BP, my overtime channel, my own personal channel, where this is simulcasting with Aponte and was heavily doing some stuff during draft season. Haven't done as much during the season, just been doing weekly with Aponte, but I think that's all I need for my extra channel because I do enough podcasting. And how many podcasts does one guy need, right? But anytime I need extra time to do something, I go to OT with BP, so subscribe there as well.
Yep, I know Mike hates to see me and Brian Peacock coming because we're always in front of it and we're always talking, but thank you guys again for tuning in. Make sure you guys hop on over there and check out Brian in 5 minutes. Again, look out for Niners Nation, where I'll be writing. Again, like, subscribe. Thank you guys for tuning in. And as always, go Niners. Welcome, everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte.